What is up everyone, Movie back again with another episode of Review Roundup. This is only the second time I've ever done one of these videos, and the last one I done was a couple of weeks ago now. This is basically just mini reviews of movies that I don't really have on my radar or weren't anticipating too much, but I have watched in the year 2021. I want to try and review every film I see this year on the channel, and if you want to see the last episode of this or any other 2021 movie reviews, they'll be down below in the description. This does not mean that these movies are bad or anything. They're just ones that I didn't really have an eye on. In fact, one of these films is now in my top 10 movies of the year. That's how good it was. So let's just get cracking. 4 movies to talk about here, and let's start with the first one, The Last Duel. Now, Ridley Scott hasn't been my most favourite director in the past few years, but this was a return to form from the genius that brought us Alien and Blade Runner. This tells the story of two friends, John and Jacques, who fall out when Marguerite, the wife of John, claims Jacques raped her. The two then let the fate of one another be decided by God in a duel to the death. The thing that struck me most about The Last Duel is that we hear from each of these 3 characters' points of view as to what happened. The movie then spends a lot of time on each person's perspective. It's kind of strange too, because each one feels very familiar each time around, but dialogue and character personalities have changed each time to keep it different and fresh enough. I honestly don't recall seeing a movie do this apart from the first Rise of the Foot Soldier movie towards the end, where it shows 3 different endings. Wow, there's 2 movies I never thought I'd compare. Now, an example of this is Adam Driver's character and Jodie Comer's character may be talking in one scene, and there's a little bit of sexual tension there, if you like, or you think that one or the other might have a thing for the other one. And later on in the story, Jodie Comer is, dancing with her husband, Matt Damon's character, and she keeps looking over at Adam Driver, and Adam Driver is saying to his friend, yeah, she's really into me, or I can tell the way she's looking at me. But in another story, Jodie Comer is saying to her husband, John, played by Matt Damon, we've got to, just be nice to him, give him a little smile now and again so he knows that we're still on his side. So you see 2 sides of the story, or in this movie's case, 3 sides, and I just thought it was a really clever way of telling the tale. I mean, this really worked, and I didn't know that going into the movie that it was going to be this way. If I did, I may have been even more put off by this historical period piece. They're not usually top of my radar, but I loved this unique take, and it surprised the hell out of me. Added to this are incredible performances from a top-tier cast. Matt Damon and Ben Affleck reunite once again, and both of them were great as usual. Adam Driver is someone who is really growing on me now. I honestly didn't care too much for him at first, but his character here was so dominant on screen. However, the standout for me is Jodie Comer. Wow, she just lit up the screen in every single way, and you can't take your eyes off her. She is really quickly becoming one of the best actresses working today, and I'm so happy to see someone from my hometown doing so well in this massive industry. What makes the cast so great though is their ability to play slightly different character personalities in each perspective. They have to adjust from time to time. Great performances all round. And the runtime here is pretty long for some people, being over 2 hours and 30 minutes, but I never thought it dragged ever. I was so immersed into medieval France and always intrigued to where the story was going, which was topped off by an absolutely brilliant finale. If I had one gripe, I wish we would just get a little bit more closure by the end. But it's also hard to understand how they could have gone about it on the other hand. By the way, if you're a little bit squeamish, there are some scenes here involving rape that are quite brutal, so I'm just giving you a heads up right there. This is definitely one of my favourite movies of the year so far though, and the best thing Scott has done since The Martian. I'm going to give The Last Duel an 8.5 out of 10. Next up, we have The Guilty. This tells the story of Joe Baylor, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, who has been demoted to a 911 call dispatch desk, and he becomes obsessed with helping a woman who has been kidnapped by her ex-partner. Now, if you think of films like Buried or Loch, you'll know why I'm giving them a mention here. That is because the entirety of The Guilty takes place in the one location, with Jake Gyllenhaal's character just talking to people on the phone. But this is another example of how a great story can be told with so little at your disposal. Despite mentioning them other films though, this movie most reminded me of The Call with Halle Berry regarding its storyline. This is without seeing scenarios on the other end of the phone though, and we have to imagine them, and I think this was way more effective than that movie. This film constantly asks you to build a picture of what is going on using its clever dialogue, and it works as an interaction with the viewer. Even though it wasn't on screen, I could still see it, and it was a very effective way of telling the tale. I'm not sure this movie would have been half as good if the film showed us everything, and it would have seemed way too generic in my opinion. Just touching back on the dialogue there, I think this was a very well written movie, as it's always interesting and moves the story along, but helped with it massively is you can really feel the characters' emotions and their desperation, whether it be Gilmore's character Paul or just a voice on the other end of the phone. And there was also some people who bite back and argue with Paul, and they were always quite fun to hear actually. Jake Gyllenhaal just shows once again how much of a brilliant actor he is. He is fantastic in this movie, and make no mistake about it, I know this is only a Netflix original, but for me, this is one of his best performances ever. I mean, all the focus is on him, he takes centre stage, and there's so much pressure on him to perform, but he just does it with ease, and just leads this film really well. What a performance it is. This was a cool little story though, and even though it's not a massive scale movie, it did what it could to its utmost best for what it was. I just wish we got a little bit more closure, kind of like The Last Duel, to Paul's story after being invested in this character for the entire runtime. But I'm going to give The Guilty a 7.5 out of 10. Next up we have There's Someone Inside Your House. When I saw the poster on Netflix advertising this film, I knew straight away I was going to watch it. Another slasher from Netflix after the Fear Street movies? Yes please. Now this tells the story of a killer hunting down students at a school just after exposing their darkest secrets. After a decent opening scene, I thought I was in for a treat here. Okay, it was not on the same level as, let's say, Scream, but I was on board. However, this movie quickly slid downhill due to a ton of problems, which is a shame, because I thought this was a really cool concept, and the killer also wears a mask of his next victim, which is something I haven't seen before. We also have some decent kills on show here, so what could possibly be wrong from a slasher movie? First off, these main group of characters were all just so dull and have nothing about them. I know this can be common in slashers, they're just there for the kill count mostly, but man, it was hard to sit through some of this depressing dialogue, and a couple of them seemed to just be complete arseholes in all honesty. I didn't care if any of them died, I didn't root for anyone, I just watched and tried to guess who the killer was going to be for my own entertainment, because this movie sure weren't giving me much. And I did guess, with about 20 minutes to go before the reveal, which is a problem for any whodunit movie, I think. It wasn't a lucky guess either, it's because I felt the film just didn't hide it too well. By the way, the speech and the explaining we get from the killer at the end of this movie, Jesus, it all just felt so cliche. I don't know why horror movies do this. It just wouldn't happen this way in real life, and this is another stupid moment in this movie. In fact, there's a ton of the old horror cliches in here too. The whole movie just felt like one big cliche. It's just not a very well made slasher in all honesty. It's a poor man's Fear Street, and even those movies weren't anything amazing. By the way too, the soundtrack just sucks ass. So many grim songs have been picked here, and it only added to making me want the movie to end even quicker. This was one of my least favourite films of the year, and will go down as one of them bad Netflix originals, unfortunately. I'm going to give There's Someone Inside Your House a 4 out of 10. Next up we have The Muppets Haunted Mansion. Now I've always had a soft spot for The Muppets. I haven't seen all the movies or anything, but it was the first film I ever went to see at the cinema, that being The Muppets Christmas Carol. And when this popped up on Disney Plus at just 56 minutes long, I thought why not? So I gave it a go. So let's get into it. This tells the story of Gonzo and Pepe, who have to spend one night in the famous haunted mansion and survive. Firstly, Pepe is my new favourite Muppets character right now. I don't know too much about him, but this guy just ran the show here. I laughed so hard at some of his scenes and one-liners, and he is the star of the show. The humour is definitely subjective though, but everything landed for me, especially when it came from this character. As for the movie, it's a fun enough time and has its own take on the infamous House on the Haunted Hill story. Combining Muppets, humans and horror was a cool mixture, and it's just nice and easy fun that you don't have to think too much about. The Muppets like a song or two here, and they are fairly decent. I'm not going to say on the same level or anywhere near as memorable as Here Comes Mr. Humbug, Here Comes Mr. Grimm, but they are solid enough. And the Muppet Haunted Mansion doesn't overstay its welcome, which is kind of the double-edged sword, actually. I think this film may have got a little bit too repetitive if it was 20 minutes longer. But on the other hand, it didn't feel like a ton of care had gone into it. It just felt like Disney had said, oh, we'll just make this Halloween special and say, here you go, it's on Disney Plus for you lot. Look what we've done. Bravo us. This is just a plain nice time though, and you can't help but be entertained, especially by Pepe. I'm going to give the Muppets Haunted Mansion a 6.5 out of 10. Okay guys, I hope you all enjoyed this review roundup. Have you seen any of these movies that I talked about here? Do you agree with these scores? Do you not agree? Leave it down below in the comments and I'll reply to every single one of you, I promise. Take it all easy guys. I'll see you all next video.